Hey everyone, it's Lori, and I am here today with a little bit of a book review. I am a big fan of books about books, and I have quite a few, but most of the books about books that I have read over the years focus on books for children. So when we were recently at our regional library, Eva found this book for me, and I did not intend to read it cover to cover, but that's what ended up happening. So the book is The Book of Books. So it's exploring America's 100 best loved novels. And it's as featured in the PBS series The Great American Read. Now, to be perfectly honest, not being a TV person, I had no idea that there was a TV show called The Great American Read. I think I may have seen some YouTube videos that were kind of sponsored by The Great American Read by PBS, but that's about my familiarity with it. So I was originally just going to flip through and only read those things that interested me, but the nice thing about this book is that there's enough interesting facts and fun little tidbits of information to keep you going. So, first off, I want to talk about what this book does well. This book has beautiful pictures. It has pictures of the cover for each of the 100 books, pictures of the authors, sometimes pictures of documents. And then there is a one-page synopsis of the book and the author. So it's very quick. You don't spend a lot of time on any one book, but it gives you a general overview. Another thing that I really enjoyed about this is that it had all sorts of pages in the middle that were just kind of for fun. So, for instance, I learned that the New York Library has a letter opener that Charles Dickens had made from his favorite cat's paw. And there's a picture. That's probably the truly weirdest thing that I read in this book. But it talks about some friendships between authors. It talks about what authors have said about the craft of writing. Talks about different characters. There's just an interesting mix of different things. There's also a couple pages where they suggest if you liked these books, you might try these types of books. They also list all of the books by year and by genre in the back, so that if you want to just look at a particular type of book, you can do that. So, I rated this 4 stars on Goodreads. I really enjoyed reading it. However, I would not suggest you purchase this book. So we're going to go into some of the things that I found to be kind of flaws in this. I think it's a fun read. So definitely one that I would say go check and see if your library has it. But I did not find it to be a resource in the way a lot of my other books about books are. Before I get into my criticisms, I'm going to go over what I've read, what I added to my TBR, and what I'm not interested in. So, this is a book that covers 100 books, and of those 100 books, I have read 27 of them. I added 27 to my TBR, and then there were 46 that were just not books I was interested in. Break that down a little bit more. 12 of the books I have read, but they were a long time ago. That might include books I read in high school, books I read, as a young adult, in college, whatever. And of those 12 books, I said I would be willing to reread 8 of them. So that's a pretty good number of them. And then 15 of the books I have read recently. And for recently, I decided I would put them in this category if I could remember reading them while living in this house, because we've been here about 10 years. And I'm old enough that 10 years is relatively recently for me. In the books that I'm not interested in, 41 of them were just like, no, that's not really for me, but there could be some point in the future where I could see myself reading them, perhaps if somebody highly suggested them to me. But there were 5 that I put in a definite no category, just books that I don't foresee myself ever reading for any reason. One of my major criticisms of this book is that it is a very modern leading book. So if you flip to the page towards the back where it lists all of the books by publication date, this is what I found. I found that there were 3 published before 1800. So that's a very small number out of 100 to be kind of older books. And then 14 books were published between 1800 and 1899. Now, between 1900 and 1949, there were additional 14 books. And then between 1950 and 1979, there were 22 books. Between 1980 and 1999, there were 28 books. And from the year 2000 to 2016, which was the most recent publication date listed, there were 18 books. So I just find it very much leaning towards more modern books, and while that's not a problem, it's just not something that fits well with my temperament. And I do believe that a lot of the books in the 1980s to 2016 categories in particular, maybe 1950s on, are books that in the future will not be considered classics. And that's okay. Not everything has to be a classic book. But I kind of feel like because it skews so modern, only the very best books from earlier times were included. And then some of the books were maybe not as high quality as some of those earlier books, but made the list just based on being more modern and fitting well with modern sensibilities. I did appreciate that a lot of the books in here were diverse. They came from very diverse authors and very diverse perspectives. I found quite a few new books that I probably wouldn't have thought of before, but I do think it also has a little bit of a liberal slant to it. One particular thing that just kind of bothered me was there was an author, I can't remember offhand who he was, but talking about his particular book, they mentioned that this author had converted to Catholicism. And then in talking about the book, it said that the 2 characters, one showed the best of technology and one showed the worst of technology, like the best of modern science and the worst of modern science. And so for the best of modern science, the list they came up with was penicillin, the birth control pill, and other stuff. Now, that just made me a little crazy. Like, so the author's Catholic. I'm Catholic, so hot button issue for me. And so the things that improved society the most were penicillin and birth control pills. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of fond of pasteurization that has made food safer. I can just think of a whole lot of great technologies that aren't birth control. I mean, going back to the years of publication, I decided it would be fun to kind of figure out what % of the books I had either read or was interested in reading from each of the different eras that I kind of came up with. So for the pre-1800 books, I was interested in 66% of them. There were only 3 books, so that one was maybe not the best statistics there, but the books published between 1800 and 1899, I was interested in 86% of them. Those published between 1900 and 1949, I was interested in 64% of them. Those published between 1950 and 1979, I was interested in 59% of them. Those between 1980 and 1999, 39%, and those from 2000 to 2016, also 39%. So my sweet spot for where I'm most interested is books published from about the year 1800 to 1949. That seems to be the area where I was most interested. I just found that kind of fun. One of the difficulties I had with the formatting of this book is, while I really enjoyed the pages of the books, where you had a very nice picture of the cover and a picture of the author and very well spaced text. That was all great. But on those bonus pages that were just about little random things like library collections or writer's thoughts on writing, they made those pages blue. And I'm just going to show you one. They made those pages blue and they made the text white and tiny. Now you can see how much glare my light in my room, this is really throwing off the color on the camera, it looks like. You can see how much glare it's getting from light, and so I found it very hard to read. This might be an old person problem, but the text is tiny and the text is white, and I did not like this design at all. Sure, it looks pretty, it's just very hard to read. So they also break these 100 books down into genres, and some of the books are placed in multiple genres, which makes sense because that often happens. So I thought I'd just go through the different genres that they cover in this book. It is all novels, so it is all, for the most part, fiction, some historical fiction thrown in there, but so, you know, there's no nonfiction or anything like that. So the categories that they have for genres in this book are action adventure, coming of age, young adult type things, Christian, fantasy, gothic, historical, humor, literary, mystery / detective. There's also romance, sci-fi, thrillers, visionary or metaphysical, and world is a category they kind of had. So they broke these all down into these categories. And I just kind of went through because I'm a total nerd and I like to do things like figure out numbers. And for each category, I kind of wrote out how many of that category I had read and how many I was interested in reading and how many they had in that category. So, unsurprisingly, the genres that interested me least in here, and this was not a shock at all, was Christian, romance, and thrillers. And that's generally 3 genres that I just avoid in general. I am not a fan of thrillers. I find them scary. I used to read them more. I'm just too much of a wimp now. Romance, I can deal with romance, but I'm not likely to read a book that is strictly about a romance. It's just not my sort of thing. And then Christian books. This one may sound weird because I am a Christian, I'm Catholic, but I find them to be generally a little condescending and preachy, depending on who wrote them. So some things I'm more likely to try, but of the 3 books they had in their Christian category, I was interested in 0 of them, and I had read 0 of them. One of the surprising genres that apparently might be a thing for me is Gothic. Now, I had never really considered whether or not I liked Gothic novels. They had 4 Gothic novels in this book. I have read 2 of them, and I put 2 of them on my TBR. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I apparently want to read all the Gothic novels they have. The categories that I've read the most books in are coming of age or young adult, and I've read 7 out of the 14 books, and I want to read an additional 4, so apparently that's kind of one of those things that I do like. Historical, I've read 4 out of the 11, and I'd like to read an additional 3. For sci-fi, I have read 5 of the books they have in here. I would like to read an additional 2, and they had 13, so while sci-fi is a favorite genre of mine, I don't know that their sci-fi choices are among my favorite choices for that genre. I also generally really like fantasy. I've read 4 of the books that they have in here. I would like to read 2 more, and they had 10 total fantasy books. I guess the other category that I had quite a few books in was literary. I have read 3. There's an additional 5 I would like to read, and there were 15 total in here. So overall, my review of the Book of Books is, this is a fun book to read. It's a great way to learn a little bit about 100 different novels written from the 1950s on. 68 of the books in here were written in 1950 or later. So if that is the type of book or the era that you like to read from, this might be very helpful. And it does have 18 books written since the year 2000, so if you like more modern books as well, this might be a great one for you. I do not think this is one you need to have in your personal collection. It's fun. It's worth reading or flipping through, but it's not earth-shattering. I mean, if you just like the book, if you like the aesthetics of it, and you have a bigger book budget than me, go ahead and buy it. But, it's fun. But while I got 4 stars worth of enjoyment out of it, I don't feel as though I would get that much enjoyment out of it if I were to read it again. So I'm glad I've gone through this. I did add 27 books to my TBR. A few of those were already on it, but 27 of the books in here are on my TBR. And it's just a very nice little book. I'll just show one page. So here's Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, which I have read. So they have an early edition portrait, magazine it was serialized in, and some information both about the novel and about the author. So having this for each of the 100 books is kind of fun. But is this worth whatever the price tag on this? I really don't even know how much this one costs. Anyway, so I recommend picking this up if it sounds interesting, checking out some of the books, seeing if you find anything in here that you might like to read. I'm excited to go back to my library and bring my little to-read shelf and see if I can find a couple of these at the library that I might want to try, particularly the ones that I had never heard of before. So thank you very much for watching this review, and please let me know in the comments if you have read this book or if you're interested in checking it out now. If you would be interested in seeing another video of books about books, I would certainly love to share my collection of those with you. So please leave a comment down below if that sounds interesting. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.